Welcome back, Cultural Resetters. This is another artist interview. We're super excited to have another amazing creative with us this week. Bringing soothing sounds from New York City is Mae Krell. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're so glad to have you. Always interested in learning everybody's story. I know that you were born and raised, grew up in New York City, but when did you get your creative start?
Yeah, around 14, I started doing photography work, which is what first brought me into the music industry. And then I started properly making music and writing songs when I was about 17. So a little bit later, my voice is cracked. A little bit later than a lot of artists that I know and work with.
So your start musically was kind of like an on off, right? Like you put out a single and then took a second and then came back and then took a second.
Yeah, I wasn't, I would say the first took a second wasn't necessarily with my consent. I was shipped off for mental health treatment, which I've been very open about in the narrative of the EP as well. So I put a single out and then was away for about a year, came back, put the rest of that record out, toured it, and then made like a conscious step back to reevaluate what I wanted to sound like, what type of music I wanted to make, and how I was going to be consistent about it. And so I kind of worked and made multiple songs before I started releasing again. So I knew that I could keep putting singles out as opposed to putting something out, having to follow it up, not having a song ready yet, etc.
Right. Were you always like having the intention of being a musician?
Um, the first live show I went to, and I was talking about this earlier today actually, I was 14 and it was like a luck thing. Like my friends and I were like hanging out outside, hoping to buy like standing $10 last minute tickets, and ended up getting pit tickets for free. And it was a really amazing experience. And it kind of like hit me when I was there that I wanted to do that. And I didn't play any instruments. I've never written a song and I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I wanted to be up on stage doing that, what that person's doing. And so from there, it was just like an on and off, like kind of weird advancement into it. I knew I wanted to make music, but I was too shy and anxious about it, and I didn't know what I was doing. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't trust in myself to do that. What's the closest I can get? And the closest person was in the photo pit. And I was like, maybe I could do that. People don't have to look at me that way. Like I can be shy and I can do that. And so I got like a cheap camera on eBay and fixed it up and started shooting shows for like at $10 venues in the city, and very quickly got thrown headfirst into that like as a career when I was like 15. And kind of cycled in it and had a really good time until it like hit me one day that I was advancing other people's careers when I wanted to have my own in music. And I kind of like sat down with myself and made a pact that I was going to try. It didn't matter if I was good enough or if I thought I was good enough or if I knew what I was doing. I was just going to try it, because if I didn't, then I was probably going to regret it. And that's when I picked up a guitar and tried to figure out what I was doing and started writing songs. And I still do photo work occasionally. I always joke that I come out of retirement for fun projects.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept doing it for a while, but it went from being my like 24/7 to being a second priority.
I love that you talked about how like you got a close proximity to what you wanted to do, but then you actually made that step to actually get into what you wanted to do. There's this really cool book called The Artist Way. I don't remember who it's by, but it's a really popular book among creatives.
I have it right there in my
Love
little
it?
corner shelf.
Oh wow,
That's
wow.
perfect.
I love that book. Yeah,
You've read it, right?
I have read it.
Remember the section that talks a lot about like how a lot of creatives that want to pursue like it's directly in the spotlight, they find and like who are shy, they find like a proximity to it. You have some people who want to be stars, but they end up going and being agents. You have people who want to be stars, but they end up going being photographers or people on the side. Not that those careers aren't creative in their own right, but sometimes you have people that slide into that role and they don't really want to do that role. They want to be something different. So I admire the fact that you took that like extra step, and it takes a lot to take that extra step, especially if you're shy or especially if you have anxiety or anything like that, to become what you've always wanted to be. So
Yeah,
that
I think I know it's cool because I remember reading that and being like, oh whoa, like I did that, and I didn't even process it at the time. But I think it, and I don't know if this would have happened if I hadn't just happened to be good at photography, because I got to a professional level so quickly. And I don't think I would have realized that it wasn't the right thing unless it had become a job. Because if I was doing it as a hobby, I still enjoy it as a hobby, right? So if it had stayed a hobby, I think I wouldn't have reached a point where I was like, this isn't right for me. So I got, like, I guess in a way, I mean, lucky in a lot of ways, that I kind of reached a point that it was a sustainable job. And then I kind of realized that it wasn't right for me when I was doing it all the time. But with music, I've never felt that way. I can just write and play and be around people all day. And it can be exhausting, but it doesn't ever feel wrong.
What was that transition like from being a professional photographer to being on the stage?
I feel like it was kind of odd, because I went from photographing some of the biggest shows possible to playing at a coffee shop. And I think people forget that, like, the advancement of a music career is very slow. And so I was, like, just starting to write songs in my room and, like, figuring out how to play chords on the guitar and, like, doing these things while being around people who had done this for, like, ever. And I still feel that way, like, a lot. I get really insecure around other musicians, because every musician or singer-songwriter, anybody that I know, started, like, playing the piano when they were, like, 2, or, like, started doing stuff when they were so young. And so, like, I think the insecurity in that still exists for sure. But it never felt unnatural, I think, because I didn't necessarily just quit photography. I just stopped letting it be my first priority.
Right. Are there any musicians that directly inspire you or inspire your work?
I feel like I'm constantly inspired by different music that sounds nothing like my music. Like, I listen to some acoustic artists. I definitely listen to more not acoustic artists. And I think there's different inspiration to get from that. Like Lil Nas X and what he's doing with this track that he just put out. First of all, song slaps.
Yes.
But also just the way that he put together a really cool visual and then put a story in it, and also somehow connected in a narrative for a cause that he cares about. Like, nobody does that way. So, like, something like music that's totally different, like, I think it's really cool how he found a way to incorporate cause into a charting song. Or, like, there's this artist that my friend who produces my music just showed me her album, and it's, like, one of the most beautiful records I've ever heard, Allison Russell. And the way that she writes about her trauma from a place of joy rather than sadness is really inspiring to me. And I could go on about different musicians and the little things, but I kind of, almost in the way that I feel like people around me and my friends, like, each one of them has, like, a little thing that I really like about them that, like, kind of inspires me to be better. I feel that way about musicians as well. Like, this one has this motivation, this one has, like, this thing, you know, rather than just, like, looking up to one artist that does something similar.
What's your motivation with your artwork?
To make someone feel heard, I think. It definitely, like, can feel like it gets away sometimes, because being an independent artist is so difficult. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. But just knowing, like, once in a while hearing from someone that they heard a song and it just hit them and they didn't know how to describe that, and they can hear it from someone else. Or just feeling like they're heard when someone else wasn't listening to them, or things like that. I think just helping someone, like, even one person, like, that's what I want to do. Whether that's in the actual song or in talking about it or anything like that.
I appreciated that in your bio, when you were talking about your music, you know, you were like, when I'm writing it, it's mine, but once it's released, it's yours. And I also feel like your music in particular is something that people can put on when they're in need of connecting with music. You know, it's not just like something to turn on for the background music. It's like, I'm feeling things right now and I need music to feel it with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
something that's missing in the industry, I feel. Like music that makes you like sit down, listen to the words, actually reflect on like who you are, who you want to be. Like that's really rare because I think a lot of times right now, not that all this stuff that's coming out is bad, but like a lot of times like we kind of get these less than timeless hits. You know what I mean? Like it's a hit for like a couple months, but then it's like okay, on to the next single, on
Yeah.
to the next one,
I
on
think
to.
it's different when there's a personal connection with a song, where
Mhm.
it's like, when I'm feeling this way, this is the song. It's almost like medicine, it's like,
Yeah.
all right, this is the song that's gonna cure what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah, there's like records that I have that I feel that way about. And also, it's something that I've been really conscious of because I do love so many different types of music. And like in a world where I had all the time in the world, I would totally have like an all girl pop punk side project. You know what I mean? Like there's all these things that I would love to do. Um, but in my music, I try to make a conscious effort to have a story that's told if you're looking for it. So it can be pretty background music in a coffee shop, right? But also if you're looking to hear something and feel something, it's there rather than like a song that kind of puts the meaning in your face and is like, here's what this is, like, hear it loud, you know? It's
Mhm.
like the idea of it being able to be something you can chill to if you're going to a coffee shop and I'm playing in the back, or if like you're at a bookstore and the music's playing really quietly and it sounds kind of soothing, but if you need it, it's there as well. And I think that's like a conscious thing that I try to go for.
God,
Is
you're so tactful with everything that you do with
Oh,
your work.
thanks. I'm always nervous. I'm like have no idea what's coming out of my mouth. Like, was it? Did that make any sense? Like,
No, you have incredible thought behind what you do. Like you're just really purposeful, and I think that that's dope.
I'm wondering, and this is kind of maybe a personal question, but with your struggle with mental health and going between that and music, what was that relationship like?
do you mean like in terms of making music, or how it ties in, or just like in general?
Yeah, was music something that helped you get through that? Is music something that, like, was consistent through those times? Like, what was it that tied it together?
Yeah. Um, I I started writing music. Well, I actually started by writing really bad poetry on Tumblr. That was my origin,
All
unfortunately.
right.
I know. Got to be honest about it. You know, I can't have people digging it up, so I have to say it outright. But I started writing because I didn't know how to say it out loud. Whether it was that I was struggling to communicate emotionally because I wasn't good at being vulnerable yet, or if it was just because I couldn't get myself to physically say it, I just like sat down and like let it out. And I
Mhm.
think eventually those things became songs. And now, like, when I struggle with something, I figure it out by writing a song. And if I don't figure it out, then I just got a song, and that's fine too, you know.
Mhm.
Like recently, so I've been working with, and I literally I tell him, I'm like, I plug you in every interview I do, but a good friend of mine, Jacob Leventhal, he's the most talented person I've ever met and the kindest person I've ever met, and he is producing my music now. So he produced Colorblind and everything that we've been working on, so everything coming out is his work as well. And he works in like a real studio, and I had never been in a real studio as me being the musician rather than someone going in to take photos or like cut a demo vocal. And the first day that I went in person, which was like about a month ago, he had his friend in coming to play some keys on this track we were working on. And I just got like the most intense imposter syndrome possible. I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. I was like, this is a real studio with real musicians. Like, why am I here? This is meant for someone else. And I had this whole freak out. And then I went home and I wrote a song about
Right. There
it. You
is
know?
Well, there's this dynamic in music where it's like, on one side it's so therapeutic to create music and listen to music, but then the other side is kind of like, emotionally and mentally burdening
Oh
when
yeah.
you are part of the actual industry, because there's standards and expectations and imposter syndrome, and it's just like self-doubt, but at the same time this is the thing that makes you able to handle your self-doubt.
Yeah, and I think that's something I try to keep. My dad is really good at reminding me of this stuff when I struggle, but it's, again, like being an independent artist is difficult when you're doing everything pretty much yourself, or at least most things. And sometimes it just feels like, why am I trying? Like, why am I just putting this stuff out? Why am I like pouring everything that I have out into the world if nobody cares? You know, or at least that's how it feels sometimes. And I think reminding myself that I do it, first of all, I do it for me because I love it. And second of all, when I decided I was going to make music, I promised myself that I'd do it regardless of what I thought, right? I said, I enjoy this, and so I'm going to do it. And so I enjoy it, so I'm going to do it. And that doesn't mean that things aren't difficult sometimes. But I think when you stop enjoying the thing that you love, there's something wrong. And that could be an outside influence or it could be an inner influence. But I think that it's important to keep that in mind. And like over the pandemic, I had a kind of a hard time with that internal motivation. I used to volunteer like a couple times a week with Musicians on Call, great organization, that essentially brings musicians bedside to people in hospitals. And so you go in and you'll play a song for them, just like off of a list that's approved, or two, and then you'll go to the next room, and you go to the next room, and some people ignore you, and some people don't want you there, and some people really love it. But it really helped me to feel like making music has purpose, you know? And I wasn't even singing my songs, but I just, you know, you see someone who's been having a hard time just feel just a little bit better because someone cared enough about them to come into their room when maybe someone else didn't. Maybe the nurse didn't come in, or maybe their family didn't come visit, you know? And so for me, like I had to reevaluate a lot of finding that motivation within myself over the pandemic because I didn't have those outward places that helped me keep it. And that was also a really interesting thing to kind of sit with.
That experience must have been, I don't know, like even just thinking about it almost makes me want to cry because that's so beautiful. You know, being able to provide music to people who maybe are lonely and sick and just having a terrible time, and you're able to bring music to them. I mean, music is so curing, you know, joy and laughter is so curing, and that's what music brings.
And even like on the other end too, like there was once that I played for like this teenager and we were just like vibing, and she was like, oh my god, your tattoos are so cool, and her mom was like, no. You know, like we were just like hanging out, and that was fun too. Like I think it's also good to kind of remember in a way that like service doesn't necessarily have to be for people that are always in need. And that's something that I also had to kind of like process a little bit because I didn't really want to feel like I was doing something good and that's why it made me feel good, you know? Like I wanted to know that it was kind of mutually beneficial always. And that's honestly, they're such a great organization. Like also, they're another organization that I plug all the time because the staff is so incredible and they have like the programs all over the country. I played a couple on tour in like Texas, I think, and Nevada.
I wrote the name down so we can, I'm going to check it out for sure.
They're amazing.
Okay, so I have another question unrelated, and that's about your identity. You know, both as an LGBTQ plus, but also being Jewish, how has that at all played a role in your experience being a part of the music industry?
I have never been asked about my Judaism ever, and I actually really appreciate that. Which is definitely really interesting to hear that. Ava and I were talking about that, who reached out to you guys for a little bit. Sorry, my lizard just like stuck her little head out to say hi. I got excited. But yeah, I think I have like a less than typical opinion, I think, about being LGBT in the music industry in the sense that I just like have kind of ignored it.
That's fair. No, that's
like I was kind of like, yeah, I'm gay. Like you could tell I'm gay. So like, what else do I have to do? You know, like I haven't felt a need to be like, I'm a gay musician. You know, I'm like, I'm a musician. Like if you vibe with that, I'm gay. If you don't vibe with it, you know, like whatever, go off. Like I don't really care. And I think that that's definitely like a slightly less common thing. Um, but I also think that having, in a way, both the privilege and the not privilege of passing as a gay person in the world, just kind of, it puts me in a position where I don't have to do that. Because there's like the positive piece in music, right, where I don't have to like just tell people that I'm queer because they can tell. But then like also being more visibly queer puts you in more danger in the world. So there's like different pluses and minuses to that. But I have met a lot of LGBT musicians through like events. I think that's like the biggest thing. Like I wish I had a better answer, but I think that's probably the biggest way that it's influenced me, is that I just have more musicians in my circles that happen to be queer, which is cool. So I'm like, the only real difference is when I write a love song, the pronouns are different, you know, like at least that's how it is for me. And then with being Jewish, so both my parents are Israeli. So I grew up in a Hebrew speaking home. Started learning English when I went to school. I had a very heavy accent, not very cute as a child, in that sense too. But I had a lot of like difficulty growing up, both because of growing up speaking English and learning English as like a second language, which is part of why I'm insecure in the way that I like speak. I think like even now, like I know I sound fine, but my brain is always like jumbling and confused a little bit. And also just in kind of going around the world and needing to feel sometimes like that needs to be hidden. And I think I definitely reevaluated that a lot the past year or two, and kind of just decided that I don't care what other people think about the fact that I'm Jewish and that my family's Israeli, and that I'm just going to like my ancestors fought enough for me to be able to walk around with a star around my neck, so I'm gonna do it, you know? And being open about that, unfortunately, is also rare. Like even just with the anti-Semitism that was happening in the US, I was just putting some stuff up on social media, and so many like kids were messaging me being like, you're the only Jewish artist I've seen put up anything about this. Like nobody's talking about it. And that's like super messed up, I think. And so I think that's like an identity that's like intertwined. And also a lot of my music is influenced by Israeli folk artists that I grew up listening to. I would say probably more so, like I love Bob Dylan, in terms of like more classic American folk music. But in terms of like oldies type of artists that I'm influenced by, like Bob Dylan and Elton John are the only ones that I think of when I think of ones that speak English. And all the rest of them were artists that I grew up listening to that my dad would play that were Israeli folk artists.
Wow, that's cool. I love that. I mean,
Thank
one,
you. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, by the way.
about that. Yeah, like thank you for just talking about it and just, being
No, I
vulnerable.
appreciate it.
I do want to kind of take a shift here and kind of have a discussion about the industry itself and how we can kind of change things.
Sure.
So, I wanted to talk to you about, what it's like being an independent artist on the technical side in the industry, and if there's anything that you would change about the way the industry functions, what would it be?
Yeah, in a way, kind of wish the industry was more about developing talent the way it used to be. There's positives and negatives now with social media and the way that things run. A lot of artists that would have never been considered before have a platform. But also at the same time, like I have friends who work at labels, both independent and majors, and they only want to hear music from someone who has this many TikTok followers and this many this and that many that. They already want an artist that's developed. And if an artist is developed, why do they need you? You know? So I think that I wish there was more of a shift. Like I hope, and I know there's young people trying to do this, that there's more management companies and individuals that like get to a point where they want to develop talent and they find people that they know and that they believe in and they work with them to grow. Because I think that that's really important and doesn't really happen anymore. So I think that's like just a basic larger thing that I would change if I could.
Mhm.
Um, and I also just wish like that like women in music or like POC artists or like LGBT artists wasn't like a genre, because that's like dumb. Like, I'm like, just remove them from your brain. Like, I would just like hit delete, you know? I'm like, why can't this person just be an artist? Why does it have to like be in like this stupid box of like what they look like or what their background is, you know?
I think having genres is crippling to the music industry. Like, it oversimplifies to the point where it is crippling.
Yeah, no, I think that like even within just like genre, like something as like pop or R&B or whatever, I'm like, what about crossover artists? Like, why? And then you push them into one box as well. Like the whole thing, not to be like re-obsessed with Lil Nas X, but like how the track got taken off the country charts, the Old Town Road, that's a country song.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like a country song.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that he had to put Billy Ray on it to get it
boxes, but it
yeah, well, exactly. So it's, I don't know. Like, I think that like in terms of like charting, why isn't there like an independent artist chart rather than genre? Like, why don't people push different types of things, you know? So I think that's like a changing thing. And then in terms of being an independent artist, like you work with your friends. I think that's like really how it ends up being. Like you have friends that hopefully believe in you, or you meet friends that believe in you, and that's who you work with. Like one of my best friends, she does all my graphics. We always joke that she's the creative director of my life. I got her like a shirt that like has a creative director embroidered on it as a gift. But she like helps with all the lyric videos. She like does the collages for socials and like a lot of the stuff that I like have no idea how to do. Like I have ideas, but I can't do them, you know? And then Jacob produces my music, and we met through, I did his PR actually, and then we became friends. And he also just like, we've had so much fun working together. And I did my own PR for a long time. And so it's just like it's exhausting, but it's also fun because you get to work with people that you like and you trust. I just wish that I had money so we could all get paid.
So what is bitch music?
Like on my little, like on the distro?
Yeah.
Well, so I distro through KMG, who are like a division of Royalty Network, which I've been working with lately, and they're really wonderful, but they let you put whatever you want as a distributor. And my friend and I run Bitch Management, which is like a PR multimedia marketing firm. And so I was like, Kara, what if I just like put Bitch as my label? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. And then we just did it. Just like for fun, you know.
I like it. As far as a label name goes, like that's a statement label. Like you know what that label says.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
my knee ice off.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I also wanted to talk about like I'm trying to figure out how to say this. So I'm wondering, so you've got an experience, on the creative side, but also like behind the scenes as a photographer, and you worked for like these major companies like Sony, you work for these major companies, and like you've gotten some insight into how they operate, right? So if you had an opportunity to talk to like Sony directly or something like that, what would you say to them? I'm just curious.
Like as something that I want them to change or focus more on, or just like what?
Or compliment if they've done something right.
Exactly. It could be something positive. It could be something, that they should probably rectify.
They pay their freelancers on time. So I vibe with that. I vibe with getting my check on time and not 6 months late, cough, cough, other companies. Guess that's a good thing. I mean, major labels just work a certain way at this point. It's the same thing. Like, I wish they would develop artists like they used to, but that's not, unfortunately, not how it works. And so I'd just be like, y'all did better back in the day. You should go backwards a little bit.
Yeah, and then you have, kind of going along with that artist development idea, like you have artists that have longevity when you pick up artists and like you actually develop them, because like artist development is not just about, picking up somebody who's already like good and then you just kind of roll with it. You're literally about, how can I find a way to refine this artist's performance skills? How can I find a way to refine their brand? How can I find a way to refine their music? What resources can I put towards them for them to be able to kind of make it to this particular level that I want them to be at? you know, and like that has led to the creation of long-term careers. Like, God, who's still around today? We got Lady Gaga, you got like, you know, Beyonce. I'm trying to think of any artists today though in our generation that are really well developed. I think
I
Chloe and Halle are well developed.
Oh yeah, they're great.
I
Parkway.
also want to say though, with longevity comes the need for support. Having a team that supports you as the creative and doesn't just have you as a means to an end, as a means to a paycheck, you know,
Yeah.
because otherwise, if you don't have a team that supports, that's how you get burnout. That's how because longevity is difficult in the music industry. There's expectations and pressure to produce and
All the
perform.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but you have like an organization that has like a mental health, you know, like support system in their ranks where like an artist can go and they can like talk to a therapist about what they're
Soothing
going.
cares, kind of. They do that.
That could be, yeah, that's great. That could be massive. You know what I mean? If everybody employed that. Um,
Yeah.
there's just little things that it takes. Like Shay was saying, like there's just little things that, you know, artists can like take advantage of to feel supported and that can just
Yeah.
help
I
them
mean,
through.
being on tour at any level, like even just like a car or a van tour, as much as it's like literally the best thing in the world, is really difficult without therapy. If you're not someone who like, or just a support system that's like really there for you emotionally, because you just pick up and you leave your comfort zone of your home or your family or your friends or wherever you're coming from for like God knows how long, like 2 months, 4 months, 8 months, like even 2 weeks can be difficult because you go from living somewhere comfortable to like staying with random people or like staying in motels or like whatever, and being so busy that it distances you from like people you're close with. And I think it's so necessary to have that support in general as a musician. But I think with touring, people really don't talk about, people romanticize touring a lot. And a lot of people who've never toured are like, I just want to tour so bad. And the second they tour, they don't want to do it anymore.
Mhm.
Um, Unless there's someone who just like is really like properly attached to doing it. But it's a really difficult thing, and I think that that therapy and mental health help isn't talked about enough in music. But I think especially when it comes to touring, it's something that's important.
definitely.
Like, are you a musician if you're not mentally ill? Like, everybody's mentally ill.
I
Yeah,
almost
like you
feel
need
like that's
help.
I almost feel like that's an expectation,
Oh yeah,
which is very, depressing.
Toxic. Very not
It's anxiety inducing in and of itself. But let's not talk. I mean, like we'll talk about it. We talk about it. But I want to talk about your projects and your upcoming projects. As we're coming to the end of our interview, I want to know. You just had Colorblind come out, which was, I mean, I was listening to it cycling before this, and I'm probably going to listen to it on a cycle after this. But do you have anything coming up? Oh, yeah. I can't. I'm gonna fangirl. I can't. But do you have anything coming up that us and our listeners should know about?
yeah. So I haven't like officially announced it just because I don't really officially announce anything. But I do have a song coming out on August 20th. It's called Rest Stop. It is, I think, by a mile, my favorite song that I've ever written and worked on. And we made like a very nice Tumblr-esque music video, like lyric video, where we went to the rest stop where I wrote it. So I like had like a little bit of a mental breakdown. Cute. After I got a flat tire at this rest stop in like the middle of Maryland, I think it was Maryland, and wrote this song in my trunk. And now that it's like that it was done, we were kind of thinking of visuals. I was like, Kara, what if we just like drove out there? And so we drove all the way out there and filmed a video for it that I'm super excited about. And Jacob produced it. And it has like some fun guitars and like instrumentation that we haven't played with before, while still being like a very emotional track. And I'm really, really stoked about it. Like, I'm super, super excited.
That's awesome. Oh my God. I can't believe you found the exact rest stop too. Like,
Oh yeah, I had to call AAA like multiple times.
okay.
I got like I had to get towed like 70 miles, like because they like couldn't, like I didn't have an extra tire because my car didn't have one, and then it was late, and like I didn't know this, but like in like other states, like things close at like 6. So it was like 7, and like no tire shops were open. So they had to tow me all the way home. And I was like, oh my God. Or like tow me to like the closest tire shop to my house that just happened to be open, and it was like 70 miles away. So I like it was crazy. So I had to call like multiple different AAA locations, but I found it. And then we went there.
Wow.
Yeah, I would definitely write a song about that too. That sounds like a lot. It sounds like a whole lot.
Well, it's funny because it's
Probably had time.
nothing about the situation at all, you know, but it was just emotionally charged. I think it's also the narrative of it is usually by the time I put a song out, I'm like fully over a situation. This one, like while we were recording the vocals, I had to like stop and like go take an emotional break and come back. It's like about like an 8-year friendship that kind of ended overnight, which is like for me more difficult than any breakup I've ever gone through. No shade to my ex-girlfriend that Colorblind is about, but yeah, it was really difficult. And I this like for some reason just like was thinking about it nonstop while I was driving. Then I got this flat tire, and then I was already emotional. Then I started sobbing.
Oh, I know. It's like the straw. That's the straw that broke the back.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, like I had got my license, like, I don't know, not that long before. So I was like, flat tires, like, no.
Oh my God.
It's the biggest deal in the world.
That's crazy. Well, I want to kind of like sum up the end of this interview by asking this, one question. What advice do you think you would give to any aspiring creatives who haven't found their footing yet, creatives that are pursuing the independent path? What would you say to them?
It's like, remember why you're doing it. Always. Because like if you wouldn't make music unless people were hearing it, then you should like do something else. Like you need to like have the motivation should be internal. That's a very therapy term, but like internal motivation. But know why you're doing it, and don't forget it, and don't let other people like change that, and just keep trying. That's my dad is like he's good at reminding me this, but he's like, why you're doing this, and it's because you love it, and that you help a person once in a while, and that's all that you want to do. So like, what could possibly be wrong?
That's beautiful.
And he's very right. Like he's like, what's wrong? He's like, some kid DM'd you last week that the song really like helped them get through this breakup. Like, what could be wrong? Like you're enjoying yourself, you're making music. And I'm like, you're right. So I think that's like really good. Yeah.
Shout out to Dad.
My dad's the best. He's so funny. He comes to like every single show that I play. And like when I lived with him, he liked to carry my guitar home. So he would like have the guitar on his shoulder and we would walk home from the gig. But it took convincing. When I told my parents I wanted to make music, they both laughed at me. So it wasn't always like that, but now it is. And he's so sweet. He's the best.
I'm happy you broke through that and became the incredible artist that you are today. I mean, I want to say thank you again for just like talking to us and being vulnerable enough to tell us the story. Mae, we love you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. You guys are so nice.
Thank you.
Of course. So with that being said, everybody, we're going to log off. We'll see everybody next week. Definitely be sure to follow The Cultural Reset. Also follow Mae Krell. And all of these links are going to be in the description below if you want to check them out. So bye, Cultural Resetters.
Bye.